In the summer of 2018, a group of 6 friends, 3 women and 3 men, planned an adventurous trek across the Appalachian Mountains, Maine. This place is known for its dense old-growth forests, rugged trails, and nearly untouched wilderness, an ideal location for those who love exploration and challenging themselves. But it also holds unforeseen dangers. In the group was Sarah Miller, whose name has been changed, a single young woman, strong and adventurous. Accompanying her were her 2 closest friends, Maria and Jessica, whose names have been changed. The 3 were very close. The other 3 guys were David, Ben, and Tom, whose names have been changed. Reliable hiking companions. We began our journey on a beautiful sunny morning. The air was fresh, birds sang cheerfully, and the majestic natural scenery filled us with energy and excitement. We followed less traveled trails, heading deeper into the mountain range. The deeper we went into the forest, the more evident the wilderness became. Phone signals gradually disappeared completely. We were left only with nature and ourselves. The towering ancient trees, moss-covered rocks, and the eerie silence of the deep forest created an atmosphere that was both majestic and slightly chilling. We hiked for hours, overcoming steep slopes and rugged sections. Fatigue began to show, but team spirit and the excitement of discovery still pushed us forward. In the late afternoon, as the sun began to set behind the mountain peaks, we decided to stop and camp for the night. We chose a small clearing, nestled among the trees, away from the main trail. We quickly got to work setting up the tents. The 3 girls decided to sleep in one tent to feel safer. The 3 guys set up their tent a short distance away, in another clearing nearby. As darkness began to envelop the forest, we built a campfire. The flickering flames illuminated our small campsite area, creating a warm and familiar atmosphere amidst the cold darkness of the forest. We sat gathered around the fire, grilling food, talking, and laughing. The conversation gradually turned to ghost stories, legends about haunted forests, about people who had mysteriously disappeared in the mountains. Jessica, who seemed more sensitive to strange things, sat in silence for a long time, staring into the darkness surrounding the campfire area. Her face was slightly pale. "Jess, what's wrong?" Sarah asked, noticing her friend's silence. Jessica turned her head to look at Sarah, her eyes wide. I feel like someone is watching us from the woods," she said softly, her voice trembling. We looked at each other worriedly. David took out a powerful flashlight and shone it towards where Jessica had pointed. The flashlight beam cut through the night, illuminating a section of the forest in the distance. Nothing was there, only trees and darkness. "It's nothing, Jess," David said, trying to reassure her. "You must just be tired." However, a sense of unease had crept into our group. The darkness of the deep forest seemed to hide something other than wild animals. We sat by the campfire for a while longer. But the atmosphere had changed. Laughter and conversation had diminished. Everyone sensed some presence around us. An invisible but very real presence. As the fire embers gradually died down, we decided to go to sleep. The 3 girls crawled into their tent. The 3 guys also returned to their tent in the other clearing. We didn't know that night in the deep forest, something horrifying was waiting. Something that would turn our adventure trip into a bloody nightmare. The bloody trail leading into the wilderness had just opened. The three of us crawled into the tent, trying to create a sense of safety amidst the wilderness and darkness of the deep forest. Outside, night enveloped the campsite. The sounds of insects, animals, and wind blowing through the leaves created a strange and sometimes terrifying symphony of the night forest. Jessica lay between Sarah and Maria. She still seemed scared from the evening. "Do you guys hear anything?" Jessica asked softly, her voice trembling. Sarah and Maria listened. The sounds of insects and animals were normal. But there was something else. A faint rustling sound, seeming to move somewhere close to our tent. "It's probably just animals, Jess," Maria said, trying to reassure her friend and herself. However, that rustling didn't sound like normal animal sounds. It sounded deliberate, as if someone was walking very quietly around our tent. We lay perfectly still, listening. The rustling moved from the front of the tent to one side, then to the back. We felt as if someone was walking in a circle around our tent, observing us from outside the thin tent fabric. A sudden cold draft enveloped the tent. Even though it wasn't too cold outside, the coldness was very different, very deep, as if it penetrated our bones. Jessica slightly shivered. "So cold," she mumbled. Sarah and Maria also felt cold. The rustling stopped. It was replaced by another sound. The sound of a branch breaking very faintly, somewhere very close to the tent. Then the rustling of dry leaves, as if someone was stepping on them. We held our breath. Our hearts pounded in our chests. Something was right outside the tent. Then, we heard breathing. Very faint breathing, but clear, like the breathing of a person. It was coming from right outside our tent fabric. Jessica subtly squeezed Sarah and Maria's hands. Her hands were icy cold. We lay there, listening to the breathing in the darkness, feeling utter terror. Time seemed to stand still. After that, the breathing stopped. The faint rustling sound reappeared, moving further away, merging into the sounds of the night forest. Silence returned, except for the sounds of animals and insects. But the fear in the tent did not dissipate. We lay there, not daring to say anything, not daring to move much. We knew we weren't just three people in the tent tonight. An invisible presence had been very close, watching us in the darkness. Did the three guys in the other tent hear anything? We didn't know. The late night in the deep forest had given us a horrifying experience. We had entered a place we didn't fully understand, and something from that place had found us. The invisible presence in the deep forest had overwhelmed us in the darkness. After the horrifying late night, we lay in the tent, barely sleeping. Every small noise made us jump. The fear of the invisible presence outside was still there. As dawn began to break, bringing faint light through the thick tree canopy, the fear of the previous night gradually gave way to fatigue and relief that the darkness was over. We slowly got out of the tent. The morning air in the forest was cold and damp. Sarah and Maria looked at each other, their faces both pale from lack of sleep and fear. Jessica wasn't there. We turned our heads to look inside the tent. Jessica's sleeping bag was still in its place, but Jessica was no longer in it. The tent door was slightly ajar. Sarah felt a sudden cold shiver run down her spine. "Jess? Where's Jess?" she asked, her voice trembling. Maria quickly looked inside the tent. "Jessica, where are you?" There was no answer. We looked at each other worriedly. Jessica never woke up that early. She was the one who slept in the latest in the group. Sarah and Maria quickly got out of the tent, looking around the small campsite. Jessica, Sarah called out loudly for her friend. Jessica, Maria also called out. There was no answer. We ran to the guys' tent. Their tent was still closed. We woke them up. David, Ben, and Tom came out of their tent, looking groggy. "What's wrong, guys?" David asked. "Jessica is missing," Sarah said, her voice full of panic. "She's not in the tent." The three guys suddenly became fully awake. They looked at each other in confusion. We searched together for Jessica around the campsite area. We called out her name repeatedly. "Jessica, Jessica, where are you?" Only the silence of the deep forest replied. There was no trace of Jessica. Her sleeping bag was still in the tent. Her shoes were still outside the tent door. She seemed to have gone out in the middle of the night, wearing only her sleepwear. It didn't make sense. Jessica would never go out into the forest alone at night, especially after what we had sensed last night. Fear began to rise in our group. Jessica's disappearance was terrifyingly strange. We expanded our search area, going deeper into the forest around the campsite. We called out her name constantly. Only the silence of the deep forest answered. Every step we took deeper into the forest brought with it a sense of unease. The forest looked normal in the daylight, but we still sensed something gloomy lurking there. Jessica's terrifying disappearance in the deep forest was something beyond our understanding. It wasn't a normal case of getting lost. Something was seriously wrong that happened last night, and it was connected to the invisible presence we had sensed. Fear and despair overwhelmed us as the search for Jessica in the deep forest yielded no results. We had searched everywhere around the campsite, calling her name until our voices were hoarse, but found no trace. We knew we had to report this incident to the authorities. However, there was absolutely no phone signal. We had to hike back to the main trail, hoping to find a place with signal or encounter other people. Meanwhile, David, Ben, and Tom decided to continue searching for Jessica, going deeper into the forest. They believed Jessica might have just wandered off nearby. Sarah and Maria, though scared, decided to stay at the campsite, waiting and hoping Jessica would return. The two of us sat by the extinguished campfire, staring into the surrounding forest, filled with worry and fear. Every sound in the forest made us jump. The fear from the previous night, the invisible presence, and Jessica's terrifying disappearance tormented us. Time passed very slowly. Around mid-morning, we heard David and Ben calling from deeper in the forest. Their voices were filled with panic and pain. "Sarah, Maria, come here quickly." We rushed towards the voices. When we arrived, we saw David, Ben, and Tom standing there, their faces deathly pale with fear and horror. They were staring at something on the ground. As we got closer, we saw it was Jessica. She was lying there, on the forest floor, amidst the dry leaves and branches. But the sight, it was horrifying. Her body was in a strange, unnatural position. Her face looked pale, her eyes wide open, filled with terror. And the most terrifying thing, there were strange wounds on her body. Not wounds from an animal attack. The wounds looked as if some sharp object had pierced through her skin and flesh, creating irregular and deep cuts. There wasn't much blood. The blood seemed to have been drained. And around her body, On the ground, there were strange marks. Marks like dried mud or something dark, forming indistinct shapes. Sarah and Maria screamed in horror and fell to the ground. Tears streamed down our faces. "No, it can't be," Sarah mumbled, her voice choked. David, Ben, and Tom also stood there, trembling. They didn't know what to do. Jessica's death was a terrifying mystery. It wasn't a normal attack. It looked as if she had been tormented by something evil. We knew that Jessica's death was related to what we had sensed last night. The invisible presence in the deep forest. The shadow walking around our tent. It had taken Jessica. We stayed there, beside Jessica's body, in horror and despair. The surrounding forest suddenly became more terrifying than ever. The trees were like giant black shadows, staring at us. We knew we had to leave immediately. But fear had overwhelmed us. The mysterious death of our close friend in the deep forest was a terrible shock. It had turned our adventure trip into a bloody nightmare. And we didn't know if we could get out of that deep forest safely. After discovering Jessica's horrifying body, we were in utter shock and panic. The fear of something evil in the deep forest had overcome us. We knew we had to get Jessica's body out of the forest and report the incident to the authorities. However, it was very difficult. There were only 6 of us. Tired and panicked, David, Ben, and Tom tried to carry Jessica's body. Sarah and Maria, though grieving and scared, also tried to help. We began the difficult journey to get out of the deep forest. Every step we took was heavy with fear and loss. The surrounding forest seemed to be staring at us, as if it didn't want us to leave. Strange noises occasionally echoed from somewhere in the forest, making us jump. We hiked for hours, trying to find our way out of the forest. The feeling of being watched was still there, persistent. Finally, after a tiring and terrifying journey, we reached the main trail and found a place with phone signal. We contacted the authorities and reported the incident. Police and rescue teams were dispatched to the deep forest to investigate and retrieve Jessica's body. An investigation into Jessica's death was conducted. However, investigators had difficulty determining the official cause of death. The wounds on her body didn't match any type of animal attack they knew of. There were also no signs of a homicide committed by a human. The location where the body was found was also very strange. Not too far from the campsite, but in a difficult-to-access area. Investigators were baffled. They couldn't explain Jessica's mysterious death. News of Jessica's death in the deep forest quickly spread. People speculated about the cause of her death, about strange things in that forest. For us, those who were on that trip, the truth was undeniable. We knew that Jessica's death was related to what we had sensed last night. The invisible presence, the strange noises, the feeling of being watched. And then Jessica's mysterious death, with strange wounds and lack of blood. It wasn't an animal attack. It wasn't a normal murder. It was something else. Something supernatural, something evil from the deep forest. Perhaps, the black shadow we sensed last night was what took Jessica. It had been following us in the deep forest. And it chose Jessica. The unexplained truth about Jessica's death haunted us constantly. We knew we had narrowly escaped death ourselves. The Appalachian Mountains in Maine were not just a beautiful and wild place. They were a dangerous place, where things beyond human understanding exist. And Jessica's mysterious death was horrifying evidence of that truth. Jessica's mysterious death in the deep forest left an indelible scar on our minds. We had returned from that fateful trip, but a part of us remained forever in that deadly forest. The police investigation eventually reached a dead end. There was no rational explanation for Jessica's death. The case was closed as unsolvable. However, for us, those who were there that night, the truth was clear. We knew that Jessica's death was not natural. It was caused by a supernatural force. The fear of the black shadow in the deep forest haunted us constantly. We didn't dare to camp in secluded places anymore. We were afraid of the dark. Afraid of the silence of the wild nature. Occasionally, we still had nightmares about that night. About the strange noises outside the tent. About Jessica's disappearance. And about the horrifying scene when we found her body. Sarah, Maria, David, Ben, and Tom, all of us were affected by that experience. It changed how we view the world. About the existence of supernatural things. We know that the Appalachian Mountains, and perhaps many other wilderness areas, hide dark secrets that we should never try to uncover. The legless black shadow we sensed that night, although not seen clearly, now became a symbol of fear, of the evil things lurking in nature. Perhaps, the spirit of Eleanor Dubois, fictional character from previous story, or Ma Ka Rong, character from previous story, are not the only supernatural entities that exist. There are other creatures, other things, much more terrifying, and we accidentally encountered one of them. Jessica's death is a chilling warning. It is a reminder that, in this world, there are forces that we do not understand. And we cannot control. We do not know if that black shadow is still in that forest. We do not know if it is still following us. But the fear is still there. Persistent and terrifying. We survived and returned from the death forest. But we will never truly escape it. The legacy of that fateful trip is eternal fear. The haunting memory of our close friend's mysterious death in the deep forest. It is a reminder that, in wild and isolated places, darkness can hide the most horrifying things. And we never truly know what is waiting for us in the dark. If you enjoyed these true horror stories, or stories based on accounts and mysterious cases, like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on the channel to follow our latest videos. We will bring you more terrifying and haunting stories. Thank you for listening.